that the highest King would welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace surrounds me. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Hear the word roaring as thunder, with a new future to tell. For the dry season is over, there is a cloud beginning to swell.
The sky heavy with blessing. Lift your eyes, offer your heart. Jesus Christ, open the heavens. Now we receive the Spirit of God.
We receive your rain. We receive your rain. Every seed buried in sorrow, you will call forth in its time. You are Lord, Lord of the harvest. You're calling our hope now to arise. We receive your rain. like a flood. We receive your love when you come like a flood, like a flood. We receive your we receive you now, Lord. And with great anticipation, we await the promise to come. 'Cause everything that you have promised, it will come to pass. Come on, let it be done. Well, every dream, every word, every promise, Lord, we receive it now. We receive your rain. We receive your rain. Pour your blessing on us. We receive your rain. We receive your we receive your we receive your every dream and every word, every promise you give, Lord. We receive your receive the praises of this church, Lord. We receive your rain.
Good morning, Sonrise. We're so excited you're here this morning. I'm Jared Ballinger, and I'm one of the youth leaders here at Sonrise. Next week, Route 56 and I-78 will be on a different schedule. They will only meet at 9:30 at Southwest Campus and 10 a.m. at Roanoke Campus. All right, campers, we are getting really close to camp, so if you are registered or plan to register, there are several deadlines you need to know about. The final payment deadlines for each camp are That Thing is June 11th, Camp Lakewood is June 24th, and Camp Adventure is July 2nd. You can register for any of the camps up to those dates as long as there are beds available. We also have a need for counselors for both Camp Adventure Middle School Camp and That Thing High School Camp. If you think God can use you to speak into the lives of middle school or high school students during camp, let us know. It's time to dive in because it could change your life forever. Sign up at the Information Center. Graduating seniors, you made it! Sonrise is so proud of you, and we want to make sure we celebrate with you. Please stop by at the Information Center and give us your name and details. We will be celebrating your achievement on June 10th, so we will definitely need your name and details before then. Each week in the summer, we will feature the service needs of a specific ministry area. This week's featured ministry area is kids ministry. We have a need for Sunday morning helpers for the kids ministry classrooms. All curriculum prep is done, so it's really easy and fun to interact with the kids and create memorable times for them and for you. If working with children is something you love, let us know and we will work with your schedule to see what works. There is a sign-up sheet at the Information Center for anyone who is interested. Don't forget to gather after this morning's message for fellowship and a little snack. Turn right when you hit the lobby and follow the crowd. These are just a few of the current activities. Check out today's program to make sure you see them all.
Well, as we continue our time of worship, we thought we would look at today an interesting word, and it's the word abide, which is a unique thing to do that. And as we do that, you might notice a new thing up on our platform area, and this is to help our online viewing experience. And so as people are experiencing time of worship, they're right now currently live at Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel. And so those of you that can't be here in our worshiping space, we are trying to continue to find ways, and so this helps our online viewing experience be better, because we realize as we move into not only the summer, but just different routines, that not everybody can physically be here on Sunday morning. And so we're continuing to find ways to do that. And as we move into the summer, we wanted to have the time of reflection today and look at an odd word, abide. Now, it may be a word you're familiar with, and for many it may be a word you're not familiar with. It's a word Jesus used, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. But when we think about summer and we think about different time, usually it brings travel. And for us, whenever I think about the time of summer and travel, my mind goes to rest areas. Now, the reason for that, for about a 4-year period, Anita and I led a mission team from Indiana out to the Navajo reservation. And as we did that, we took 3 15-passenger vans, and it would do, how do we move 30 people from the state of Indiana to the lower lip, the upper part of the Navajo Nation, lower lip of Utah, upper part of the Navajo Nation. Now, there are more efficient ways to move 30 people across the nation. But what we had to do was to take 30 people that did not know each other and to build a team. Because once we got out there, we were doing mission and ministry with a local church in the Dwujibaco Canyon. And so we had to build team. And so we drove, because it took us 3 days of driving, building team, rotating, and then we'd spend a day in Colorado, kind of refreshing, renewing, and then we would drive down, go over to Cortez, past Sleeping Ute Mountain, and then we would drive out into the canyon of a desert and spend a week there with the Navajo people. Now, in the trip, some interesting things happen, because I don't know if you've ever traveled west, but the further west you go, cell signal is fewer and far between, as are rest areas. And rest areas are very important when you have different people traveling. And we would travel, and we had cell phones, but that was back before, you were still worried about minutes. Plus, you got to certain parts where you couldn't even get a signal, so we used walkie-talkies. And so we would communicate amongst ourselves in the vans using walkie-talkies. And usually what would happen is somebody would key their mic and go, "I need to rest my area." And 2 things happen. One, we ask the very important question, what is your pain level? 1 to 10. Because that let us know how soon we needed to stop. If it was a red high alert number 10, we needed to find it now. If it was like, hey, we're starting to get uncomfortable, but we got some time, then we would pull out what's a little book called The Next Exit. And this was back before we used Google a lot, and you would go, okay, we're on this road, and there's a rest area up the way, because you can have 30 people go to the bathroom much quicker in a rest area than you can in a restroom at a gas station. And so we would empty at the rest area, and then we would fill up at the gas station down the road. So that would be one thing that would happen. The second thing that would happen, and this happened in every van, usually with one person, most of the time with a couple of people, there would be somebody that go, "Oh, I am so glad." To which we would go, "Why didn't you say anything?" And they go, "Well, I didn't want to be the first one." So we had people in the van dying, hurting. I'm not going to be the one who has to say, I got to go to the bathroom. And then they'd wait for somebody else. And it's amazing how when it comes to rest, when it comes to relief, that sometimes we will push and push and push and push, or hold and hold and hold and hold, as the case may be, and never quite go, no, I need to take a pause. And so as we think about that whole notion of abiding, we think of the whole notion of rest, we realize we do this differently and we're wired to do it differently. Sometimes by the households we grew up in, we are definitely products of the North American Puritan-inspired work ethic. And so as we begin our time, I want to ask you a simple question. Do you work from your rest, or do you rest from your work? Now, at first blush, they seems kind of like an odd yet simple answer, but yet the difference is very significant. Because we are designed for one, but usually live in the other. And so what does that mean? Well, how do we look at doing that? Because oftentimes this is how most of us get into the weekend. It's like, okay, I've got to crawl into the weekend. Or maybe not just the weekend, maybe depending on how you do vacation, we push into vacation time and then we get in there. And then what usually happens, we crawl into the weekend or we crawl into our vacation. We have filled it up with so much activity, we look forward to going back to work so we can actually rest because we've exhausted ourselves in our relaxation. That's not rest. And so the question we want to look at is, how do we balance the whole notion of work and rest? Because most of us haven't figured that out, yet we are designed to do that. We are products of that Puritan work ethic. John Smith and the Puritans came to America, and we have that. We're wired for that. For some of us, it's like, well, yeah, that's the, workliness is next to godliness is most of our different themes, and we love to work. But we're not designed to do that fully. That's a part of us. And yet we need to understand how that is. I talked to a former parishioner who was from England, and it was funny. We were talking about the influence and how America does rest and just pace of life differently than some of the other parts of the country. And he goes, yeah, we kicked John Smith out. He wasn't much fun. Which I thought was kind of fun to hear from somebody from England. It's like, yeah, we got him kicked out. But when we think about this, one of the things when we think about abiding, we think about rest, we think about balance, one of the most important pieces we need to remember is we are to live into our identity in God. Well, wait a minute. I thought we were talking about rest. I thought we were talking about balance, work. But this is a key thing. We're to live into our identity in God. And the reason this is so important is we tend to build our identities around our activities. I mean, think about when you meet somebody, what are the questions you ask? What's your name? Where are you from? And then eventually we go, what do you do? What's your activity? And even good activities. I'm a mom. I'm a dad. Not I'm me, my name, and I give my vital information. We tend to build our identities around our activities. And the problem comes, and this is graduation weekend for many schools around the area. Many of our students are graduating high school. And if they're the last in line, all of a sudden moms and dads are like going, wait a minute, my identity is built around my activities of my children. Now who am I? Because I'm so-and-so's mom, I'm so-and-so's dad. We build our identities around our activities. Or our work, when what happens is either there's a job change or it begins to happen and we retire. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I used to know who I was based on my activity of going to work and doing work. Because most of us build our identity in our activity. But that's not who we're called to be. That's not who we were created to be. So we want to go back to creation. We want to pick up on day 6 of Genesis, of God speaking the world into existence. And so we see in Genesis 1, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. There's a lot of power and a lot of meat in that simple sentence. One, we're able to see that God is in community, to be like us. Now, technically, it's not community, it's a tri-unity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So the essence of who God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the beginning, was at creation. And God said, let us create humanity, human beings. We were created in the image of God. Now, there is activity in that creation. They will reign over the fish and the sea and the birds in the sky and the livestock and all the wild animals on the earth and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So we are called to steward. So there's activity, but our identity is what we're created in the image of God. And we see that again repeated in verse 27. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And so we are able to see that God has the essence of not just being male, there's community to be like us, but we also see male and female. Because we attribute attributes to God, not because God needs that, but because we need to figure out this infinite being. And so we attribute characteristics of a God so we can make sense of God. Jesus referred to God as Father. And so we have that parental structure, we understand that. But we see the male as well as the female image are both from the image of God. There's this imprint of God's image on us. And then we see that continues. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. So again, we come back to there is activity. We are designed for meaningful work, meaningful stewardship of the creation. So there's activity in our identity. And then God looked over all that he had made, and he saw that it was very good. That's the first time in the creation account he says, very, very, very good. I don't know about you, but most of us do not look in the mirror and go, very good. We don't go, hey, you're looking, okay, men will do that. But most of us, we don't go, we don't go, man, most of us go, through all the genetic makeup, this is what I got? We look at our relatives and we go, why couldn't I get that? But I got this? Really? This is the genetic roll of the dice I received at conception? So it's important to remember, God looked over all that he had made and he saw that it was very good. So we were created good in the image of God. Very, very important. And evening passed and morning came, marking day 6, the 6th day. So the key word we need to remember is that we were made in the image of God. We were created in the image of likeness. There's this imprint of God on us. Now that's hard for us to understand. So a way that we can understand that is memory foam. If you have a memory foam bed and you lay in it, you get up, what's left on the bed? An image of you laying in the bed. And then it eventually rises as the day goes, just for you to re-imprint it the next night or whenever it is you sleep. When we put our hand in memory foam, we make an imprint of our hand and it slowly comes up. God has imprinted us with his image. But we need to continue to come back. So the essence of who we are has been imprinted with the image of God from creation. The creation of all humanity as well as the creation of us as individuals at the moment of conception. Regardless of the circumstances of our conception, you are still created good, very good. God doesn't make mistakes. And the imprint of God's image is on you. But the challenge is, we also see, so we're going to jump and to see how that day passes. We see, so creation then of the heavens and the earth, everything in them was completed. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all of his work. And so God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy because it was the day he had rested from all his work of creation. And that was day 7. So what we need to remember is day 1 for humanity was a day of rest. But most of us do the pattern of God. Work 6 days and then rest. We rest from our work. But by creation, we were designed, our first day of existence as humanity was designed as a day of rest, and then to push into the rest of our existence or to push into the week. But we wrestle with that. We have this balance, and we usually are not good at that whole notion of balance. And so we have this teeter-totter thing that we have to work at, rest and abiding, and we're going to look at that word in just a moment, and then work and bearing fruit, being fruitful, multiplying, stewarding the resources. Now, if we get that down, we live a balanced life. But what happens is if we overcompensate and spend all of our time in escape, in resting, in abiding, or just hanging out, that's called escape. We live in a world that's designed for escape. We pay our people to entertain us a lot of money, our athletes and our entertainers. Why? Because we want to be entertained, we want to escape. What do you call a getaway weekend? An escape. We try to escape. And if you're spending all your time not having to work, not having to steward, not having to live out who you are, we call that out of balance escape. Now there's others of us, and I would fall in this category. I would fall on this side of the pendulum. And if you are out of balance on this side, it's called exhaustion and burnout. Now some people say it's better to burn out than to rust out. Other people would say it's better to rust out than to burn out. But the key is we're called to live a balanced life. But many times we pull away from the image of God, the image that has been imprinted on us. We're products of Genesis 3. Genesis 3 is when the first two human beings willfully chose to disobey what God had said to do. And it's called the fall. They fell out of God's original plan, God's original righteousness, and then God set a redeeming place in motion. So we pick up in the garden, God is designed for us to be in relationship. So God said, let us create, but he was also in a daily relationship with the first humans. They would be about their business, and then the evening God would come and hang out with them. And so we see in Genesis 3, when the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking about in the garden. And so they hid from the Lord God among the trees. And then the Lord God called to the man, where are you? Adam, where are you? And his reply was, we're hiding, we're naked. Or naked, depending on which part of the country you're from. Who told you that? Well, we were ashamed. We begin to hide and pull out of relationship. We pull out of the presence of God that we were created and designed to be a part of. Not only did the first two human beings do that, we do that in ourselves. And some of that is we are not living out to be the image. And so we need to remember we are created to spend time in and with the Son, in God's presence. So we see that from creation. Jesus comes along and he reiterates that again in John 15. And this is when we see the word abide. He says, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself. Unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, most of us kind of understand abiding in that. I like another translation that says it this way, remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine. You cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. So abiding simply means staying connected, staying in relationship with God. But most of us like to do our fruitfulness apart from God. But we can't. It's like, well, I want this apple branch to grow fruit, so I'm going to cut it off, and then I'm going to bring it into my house. That way I have fresh apples every morning. We would say that's ridiculous. But that's how most of us think we can design our fruitfulness. And Jesus says, no, remain in me, abide in me, for apart from me you can do nothing. And now most of us, when we try to figure this out, usually don't have a good experience. We try to figure rest out, and especially if you're like me, you peek out more on the work side of overdoing. This is usually how we take rest. Work gets off balance, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I guess I'll just hang out here for a while. See, we are designed to rest. Rest has been built into us from creation, and our weekly structure has been designed for rest. And what's interesting is whether or not we will be intentional with rest and we take rest in a regular way, rest will take us. Usually we call it illness. We call it being sick because the body says, hey, you've been pushing way too hard. stress, other things will begin to force us to pause so we can't move so that we'll rest. And so how do we find rest intentionally? The psalmist says, be still and know that I am God. I'll be honored by every nation. I'll be honored throughout the world. Now, just saying be still, some of you are like, oh, no. I cannot be still. That's not possible. I cannot just sit there and do nothing. How can that be? How can I be still? And yet the psalmist says be still. So now we have this level of guilt. I need to be still, but I feel guilty for being still because I can't be still, but I'm being still. But no, I need to be doing something because most of us work on our identities and base our identities on our activities. And so another translation says it this way. Now, for some of you, I'm going to just acknowledge that this is going to be meddling because the psalmist meddled with me when I saw this. Cease striving and know that I am God. Because the reason we cannot just pause in appropriate times of pausing is because we base our identity in our activity instead of basing our identity in being who we are as a son and a daughter of God. And so how do we cease striving? How do we cease to do that in an appropriate balance? Because some of you are like, no, that's not possible. So we look to Jesus' model. And Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Come to me. Now, in that passage, he talks about being yoked. And an oxen yoked to another oxen, we usually think of, oh, so that helps me share the burden. But that's not really what a yoke was. A yoke was really designed, yes, it did that, and it gave them a chance to double the power or triple or quadruple whatever the yoke was. But really the design of the yoke was to take a seasoned oxen or animal next to a new oxen, yoke them together, and the young oxen would learn from the seasoned oxen and learn the patterns and the rhythm of work. And so Jesus says, come to me, to yoke together with Jesus and let him teach us how to live that rhythm, because Jesus did do that. So one of those is to take regular Sabbaths and realize we all do that a little different. And so some of us are extroverts and some of us are introverts. Extroverts receive energy by being around people. Introverts recharge their batteries and rebuild their energy by being quiet and being alone. Now, when I went to college, I did Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENFP. I peaked out on the E scale. And so I would go to the library. I don't know if you've ever found this. There's weird things on college campuses. There's these big box buildings with a lot of people, and they expect you never to talk to people. I went to the library, and there were people there, so I would talk to them, and they told me, shh. It's like, but there are people here. You're not supposed to talk in the library. What do you mean not supposed to? There are people here. So I would go down to the bowels of the library, into the stacks. Some of you go, yeah, that's my sanctuary. That was not a sanctuary for me. But I would go, I should be able to do this. And so I would go down there and I would try to study, but I would hear footsteps and I would hear and know that there were people residing above me. And so it was almost like a bubble in water. I would find myself rising in and then walking down and talking to people. And I eventually got kicked out of the library because they didn't want me to talk to people. But how can you have people around and not talk to anybody? And now some of you are like going, yeah, people like you annoyed me. Yeah. But how do we recharge our batteries? Some of us are external processors. We process out here. I got to think out loud. Some of you are mullers. You're internal processors. And you say, stop it. I've got to mull. I've got to process. And you keep putting new words out there, and I've got to think. Yeah, I'm trying to think. So here, help me think through this. No, you stop because you just now gave me more data. Now I got to stop and think again. See, we're wired differently in how we recharge our batteries, how we process our world, how we rest. Now, I don't know whether it's God's humor or a product of the fall, but what I find is extroverts and introverts, internal processors and external processors marry each other. And so what happens is when the husband and wife come home and they go, hey, what are we going to do tonight? What are we going to do this weekend? The extrovert goes, we're going to go out. Oh, no, I just want to be quiet. I want to be alone. And then usually they'll say, I just want to spend time with you, honey. And then we say things like, well, I don't really want to spend time. I thought we'd spend time with other people. And that's not how it sounded. That's how it sounded. That's not what I meant. I meant, how do we, but what happens is we're trying to each recharge our own batteries, but we do it differently. And so when we think about rest, when we think about abiding, just understand we do it differently. And so do it how God has wired you. And so we rest through different times. We rest through regular times of quiet and resting. So Jesus regularly, before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went to pray in an isolated place to be able to pray. That's one of the reasons we put this tool together to be able to help you not only on Sunday morning be able to take the notes, but then on a weekly basis write down some of those things to do that. And then to spend time in scriptures, to be able to spend time so it doesn't become a dusty Bible, it becomes a red Bible and dust doesn't collect on it, and you're spending that time recharging. And then you spend time praying. So here's how this works. Here's how you are able to work from your rest. You talk with God and go, God, help me to be able to understand what I need. You read God's word and get that filled in. You write it in your journal and you're able to go, okay, God, here's what I'm hearing from you. And then you move into your day. Now, if you do that on the weekend, you go, God, I'm moving into the week. So tonight, let's say you go, okay, God, I'm moving into the week. What is it I need to do? So you talk with God, listen to God, read scripture, write it down, and then you have your marching orders. What happens with most of us is like, well, we didn't have time to pray. We didn't have time to spend time with God, and I barely had time to eat and to do other things. Why is that? Because we just got busy working, and I'll find rest. I'll rest at the end. But if we reverse it and we work from our rest, now we're able to listen to God, get our marching orders, and then to continue to stay connected. The second thing we're able to do is rest through extended times of retreat. To be able to look at how that's happening. I love how Mark 6 puts this. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour. So they were out on the ministry tour. I'm sure they had T-shirts and a merch table, and did all this. So they were out doing ministry, and they came back. And they told them all that they had taught. And then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest for a while. And now, here's what's interesting. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. Some of you are like, yeah, that's my work day. There are cultures. I don't know if you know this. There are cultures, whole countries of large groups of people that eat lunch for like an hour and a half, and it's okay, and their work endorses it. You know what most of us do? If we take a lunch break, we're usually breaking enough to eat while we're still working through it. We live in a society that we eat and we work through our lunch hour to stay productive. We now even have food designed, so if we have to travel, now my lunch break is now spent in the car while I drive with my knee, and I'm trying to eat food, so I'm not supposed to spill it on me as I'm going through that, because we want to stay productive. Jesus took a break because they didn't have time to eat. So how do we take a break and even build that into our daily rhythm and our notion, so where we can have time to eat, have time to do those different things? And so they left for a boat on the quiet place where they could be alone. So we build that rhythm. And so some rhythms to think about as you think about moving into the summer and making some adjustments for you. What is your daily rhythm? How is your day structured? Do you spend your morning getting instructions from God? Now, when I was in high school, my daily devotions was in the evening, and I would pause and reflect on the evening. Now my devotional time is in the morning, and I reflect. Some of you, your lunch is your devotional time. You get the kids and everything up and everything around. You find that you have a window for lunch to do that. The key is you do it regularly. But what's your daily structure? Weekly, what's your routine? How have you built worship as part of that? How have you built Sabbath in part of that? How have you built rest? How have you spent time for connecting with family and neighbors? Months. Now, sometimes our weeks get nuts, and they're so busy. And so you go, okay, I'm going to have 2 or 3 crazy weeks. And so how do I now, in the course of my month, pause? And so you look at what are those times of celebration, retreat, And not only that, like if you're married, how do we spend time on date nights? And how are those times we're reconnecting with significant people, friends and family, and other times with that? And so we look at those rhythms over the course of a month. And then we think of seasons, particularly the phases of the year to rest for longer periods, depending on what you are allowed for vacation time at work. Some may only have a week or two of vacation all year long. So your phases of the year is, what's vacation look like? Others of you have more, and so what's your rhythm? Do you package all together, or do you build that into a rhythm? And so you begin to think through your days, your weeks, your months, and your seasons, and build that rhythm of rest and recreation. And so as we encouraged you when we did our series on risk to create margin, most of us live lives with no margin, then we wonder why God doesn't show up. And so we have a couple of resources I just want to put on your radar to be able to help you. A friend of mine and I, two of these resources come from an experience a friend of mine and I have. We practice on Monday coaching each other as we're not only building our coaching hours and our experience, then the other one experiences coaching, and then the next week we trade it off. And normally we get coached on whatever those things are, but out of that we usually share different resources that we have, and we'll go, hey, can I share a resource? Two of these came because one of my coaching exercises I wanted to be coached on was I've got to figure out this work-life balance because I've not been good. I've peaked out on the overproducing, overworking, overstriving. And so how do I build that balance back in? And so the first one actually came out of a book called The Ambition Addiction, How to Go Slow, Give Thanks, and Discover Joy Within. And there was this notion in here he called donating time. When we spent some time in risk as we thought about thinking about how do we invest time, many times we say, how do we spend time? How do we spend time? How are we investing our time? What he brought up was, how do we donate time? Because most of us hoard it. It's my time. You can't have it. And people go, hey, can I have some of your time? No. Usually we get hangry or grumpy or mean. We don't mean to. We're just hoarding our time because you can't have it. And so he goes, you've got to begin to think through, how can I begin to think through donating my time? Which on the surface sounds like, well, I shouldn't have to donate my time or shouldn't feel guilty or shouldn't have to do that with family and friends and significant. But it's beginning to understand within ourselves how we're wired. And so we begin to go, okay, I'm going to intentionally, on purpose, with cheer, not a forced smile, but a genuine smile, donate my time to you. And so we begin to think through those significance, and there's actually a chart you can download to begin to walk through that and to be very structured in that. And so I want you to think about how do you, instead of hoarding time and looking at time as a limited commodity that I have to hold on to, which is one of the other reasons we don't rest well, is how do we begin to donate that time? The second thing is that we're giving these in our kids zone and our Route 56 and I-78 times is the family celebration bag. And this is a tool because some parents are like going, what do I do now? They're home. We got your back, don't worry. Because we want there to be time with the kids, and we're just not sure what to do. The average, when we looked at some statistics, the average parent will only spend 30 seconds a day talking to their kids. And so we have some activities, finger pulls and different things to do, punch ball, but not just fun things. There's some really practical things to be able to do in that. The June family calendar. Family challenge. Summer looks differently for every family, and some tools to be able to walk through that. How to summer on purpose, some hang time, and some other ways to grow spiritually as a family. And so if you're not sure what to do, we've got your back. And we want to come alongside of you and support you as families. And so if you didn't get that bag today, make sure you talk to Daphne or somebody from our children's ministry area because we want to support you with that resource. And the other one is a book called Rest. It's actually a series of research that he had done to look at. And what was wild is when he looked at that, how to get more done when you work less. That doesn't seem possible. And yet he walked through studies, like the whole notion of walking, that Charles Dickens and other high creatives through the years in history would simply walk. They would just walk. And that they discovered after doing some research that just the practice of walking changes the brain. Now, most of us is like, I got this, and I just knuckle down and I dive in. And he said, but just the physical act of walking helps you have creativity that you wouldn't have had before. And whether that's walking in a treadmill in a closed room or out on a path or in the parking lot outside, the physical act of walking. And then he talked about napping. Now, we live in a culture where that's not okay, and we don't do that. But he talked about Churchill, Winston Churchill. When London was getting bombed, Winston Churchill took regular naps. And they said he got more done in one day. He actually had 2 days. So he would get up, work for a day. He would actually change clothes, sleep in a sleep chamber, wake up, shower, put a different set of clothes on, and come in and finish the day while London was being bombed. But he knew himself that he could push in for a series of time, nap and rest. Now, we're slowly learning that in our American Puritan workaholic culture, and we call them power naps because that sounds better than like preschool napping. I'm power napping. I'm going to dive down and power nap. But our bodies are designed to rest and recharge, to deep play, not just play, but to be so engaged that you disengage from one thing so you could re-engage into something else. And then the thing that continues to elude us as a culture, not just as we age, is to be able to sleep. And so to build those pieces in. So those are a couple of resources if you're wrestling with that as I am, how to begin to put some of those pieces in play. Then we're able to have the words of Isaiah. The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives, hear this, power to the weak and strength to the powerless. And even youth, so this, even if you're struggling with, man, I'm aging and I just don't know what to do, even youth will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But hear these words. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles, and they will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. In just a moment, we're going to experience an ancient practice called communion. And we want to create some space so you can sit in the presence of God. But before we do that, I got a couple of questions I want to ask you as you think through some action steps. How is God's image being imprinted upon you? Now, by creation, it was already there, but how do you re-engage and let that imprint continue to be re-imprinted upon you? So what is that rhythm of abiding and fruitful work? How do you create that rhythm and abiding? Because here's what I know is, one of us, we get stuck on one or the other. So where do you tend to get stuck? Do you get stuck on abiding more? I just want to hang out with Jesus. I just need to be with Jesus. I just want to sit in the sun. That's okay, but we're also called to get some stuff done. But other people are like, I'm just working. Well, yeah, that's fine, but you're also called to sit in the sun. We usually get stuck on one or the other. They're not bad. We have to work them in balance. And so as we move into this week, maybe even into the summer, what is one thing you can do to begin to build balance and abiding and fruitfulness in the midst of that? This ancient practice started because the people of God cried out to God in bondage. And in our own work, we find ourselves in bondage, bound by the clock, bound by the identification of proving ourselves through our activities. And so out of this time, the people cried out and God acted. He sent 10 plagues to get Pharaoh's attention. It was the 10th plague that was the death angel, the Passover angel. And they celebrated that in a season and an experience and a celebration called Passover. The Hebrew people told that story year after year after year to remind themselves that God will hear the cries of his people and act on their behalf. Jesus came along and he met with his disciples. And they were doing the Passover as every rabbi did and every household did. And it came time for him to take the bread, and he broke the bread, and he said, "This is my body broken for you." Because Jesus understood that real freedom doesn't come in an ancient story, but a present practice. And he was about to go through the practice of dying and being buried and being resurrected on the cross. And then he took the cup. Tradition has it that it was a cup of redemption, that he pulled that and he said, "This is my blood shed for you," because he knew in the next few hours his blood would be shed.
Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, we only want to hear your voice. We're hanging on every word. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, we only want to know you more. We're hanging on every word. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, we only want to hear your voice. We're hanging on every word. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, we want to know you more and more. We're hanging on every word. 'Cause when you speak and when you move, when you do what only you can do, it changes us, it changes what we see and what we seek. When you come in the room, when you do what only you can do, it changes us, it changes what we see and what we see. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, we're leaning into all you are. Everything else can wait. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, come now and breathe upon our hearts. Come now and have your way. 'Cause when you speak and when you move, when you do what only you can do, it changes us, it changes what we see and what we seek. When you come in the room, when you do what only you can do, it changes us, it changes what we see. And when you move all our fears. And when you move us to tears. When you fall, we fall on our knees. When you fall, we fall at your feet. When you fall,
Well, we've gathered. Now it's time to be scattered, to go make a difference as we live out our faith, to be able to live out the image that God has imprinted upon us. Go and be who God created and redeemed you to be. Thanks for coming out. Go in peace.